The Society of Mother Earth is an invitation to come into a place where we can be human together. I mean, if the story of modernity is disconnect, we wanted to create a space where there could be an invitation to connect and to really call people in and to give people the permission and the space to be vulnerable, talk about their feelings, talk about what they're processing, what they're working through, particularly around climate.
It's clear that the majority of Americans are now experiencing climate grief and intense emotions around climate change. All of these things we don't necessarily get to talk about, and sometimes there's even shame around talking about them, especially in public spaces. And we are creating spaces where we can just meet as humans to be able to talk about it.
Society of Mother Earth is a collection of ways and spaces and times that we gather. So we have the Buffalo Show, which happens 6 times a year, and that's in the theater at the Brant Lake Bowl. We have the Wilder Buffalo Rides, which meet every month in some random space in the wild of the metro area. We have the Healing Circles, which are less frequent and a little bit more intensive and personal, and they happen right now 4 times a year.
It is pretty unique to be able to combine climate and art, but it is actually a very needed approach. Art is an entryway for conversations to happen, and music and poetry help people to process the complex emotions that come up when you are learning about and dealing with climate change.
I think all this climate change is the earth is cleansing itself. We need people to start making a relationship with the earth. Once you start caring about something and you start to realize that there's an important symbiotic relationship between you and that other entity, then you're in the essence of truth and what is really important.
So the Healing Circles are an opportunity for people to come together. It's a space where people can bring their emotions and hopes and dreams, and it's an opportunity to come together as a community to be able to talk about these things. And during the circle, we ask questions. They're questions like, what are you holding right now? What are ways that you want to reorient yourself? What are gifts and skills that you have that you can bring? And as we talk about each of these things, music and poetry is interspersed, and so people have an opportunity to process what has been said, not only their own reflections, but as they've heard from each other. And during the circle, people then are invited to be able to pick up something from the center of the circle and to find a place in the environment nearby and to release it. So we give people an opportunity to have a quiet moment individually, but then to come back together collectively to be able to continue to move through this experience together. We end with an uplifting feeling that we've released something, not only for ourselves, but for other people.
When you're in a circle, you're in it together and you realize that the power of the spirit of each person is what is important. Because even you at your best can only do so much. And that's why the circle is so important, because it really shows you that everything is connected.
You know, the circle is there not to find the answer, it's to receive all the stories and then to be a container to hold the collective weaving. And I think that's what we're doing, is we're creating that container and that space where people can hear their story in the context of the greater weaving that we're all a part of. People want to connect. We want to connect with each other.
We don't try to pull anything out of anybody or have a perfect response to somebody who's shared something very heavy, but we just allow them to let it out. And something about allowing that imperfectness to come through just feels so human, because without acknowledging it and naming those emotions or things that are coming up, we can't move through them.
There's quiet in our circles, you know, there's room for something else to emerge. I think really with the knowing that if we don't make space for something else to emerge, then what is gonna emerge is gonna be what we already know. And we already know that that doesn't work. So we need to make space for something else to emerge. And then through that emergence, we start healing, growing, learning. then we can start imagining possibilities for what can come next. And we're doing that together, not in isolation.
This is my second time coming to these climate grief circles. To be honest, the first time I went to them, I was not in a good place. I was really in the throes of a really bad depressive state, brought on basically because of climate anxiety. I think it was healing for me to be in a place where there were others who were feeling the way that I felt. I almost felt isolation prior to that. And so being able to go to that space and be around other people who had that understanding where we were talking about this very openly and mourning about it very openly and crying, or we were angry about it. I think it was one of the very first steps to kind of help me get out of that really dark place at that point in time.
We found it's beautiful to be able to create, a circle that represents the communities that we come from, gatherings that bring different perspectives together. But one thing that's become very clear is that we all hold grief differently, and that's especially important to recognize because climate change, the impacts are not felt equally. Really, the disproportionate burden of the impact is on Black, Indigenous, people of color, people who identify as LGBTQIA, youth, elders. And so we know climate grief is something that many people experience, but the levels and complexities are different depending on who you are and where you come from. For a long time, the way that we've communicated about climate change has almost been exclusively through a scientific lens. And it's really painted this picture that you have to be an expert to be able to talk about it. White supremacy, capitalism, colonialism, they have created the extractive types of systems that we cannot mimic in the solutions that we're seeking. Because we are all experts in our own lived experiences and we all have something to contribute. So we should all be part of these critical discussions and decision making that are shaping our shared future.
I guess I really just have come to believe that there is no map. Listening is the map, and relation is the repair. And I think that's what we're trying to do here, is create a space where people can listen and remember how important it is to listen and how serious it is to listen and how joyful it is to listen and how healing it is to listen. And all of that supports the relationships, and then the relationship goes on forever. It never ends.
Well, the Dakota way choha, it's just kind of like Matakwe Oyate. It's like you're trying to live in a good way with what's unknown. In our interpretation, it's kind of like trying to be a good relative. And we need to be a good relative with the earth and on the earth, because it starts with the individual. I think that's basically where we're asking some people to start doing.